Hi Journeyers, I'm Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. There is an outstanding exhibit that's going on this fall, starting in September 17th. And it's an exhibit of illuminated Jewish manuscripts. It's called Jewish Worlds Illuminated. And it shows 100 illuminated manuscripts and books from all over the world that Jews produce to both interact with their setting, their context, and with God above. And out of that comes sort of a shimmering, beautiful reality. One of the curators is Professor David Kraemer, who has also written a number of interesting works, and he said he would come on and be with us today. Welcome, Professor Kraemer.
Here I am. Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Now, you're a professor at Jewish Theological Seminary.
That's right.
Of Rabbinic and Talmudic Studies, and librarian.
That's right.
Now, tell for our audience, what is Jewish Theological Seminary?
Jewish Theological Seminary is a training institution that was founded originally to train rabbis for the American pulpit. It expanded to undergraduate studies, graduate studies. We've got cooperative programs with Columbia and Barnard, and we have been training rabbis and scholars for over 100 years.
Now, you have written a number of books that have been reflective of Jewish life. For example, you've written a book on Jewish food and on how Jews respond to suffering. And also, one of your latest works is Embracing Exile. Is that
That's right.
Really, you're talking about the value of the diaspora.
That's right.
And this exhibit is really about that, the value of the diaspora. All together, it brings together the world in a very wonderful way. Jews responding to the world in different places in a wonderful way. Tell us a little bit about the exhibit, where it's at, and how long it'll be in show, and then I'd like to ask you a little bit about it.
Sure. So this exhibition will, as you said, open on September 17th to the public. It will be open over the course of 3 months at the Grolier Club in Midtown Manhattan. And it is a great thrill for us. This is the largest exhibition that we, the Library of the Jewish Theological Seminary, have ever mounted. We have got one of the few most outstanding collections of rare Judaica anywhere in the world. And this provides an opportunity for visitors to see a broader range of Jewish culture from around the world and through the centuries that survived in books. And that is where much of Jewish culture survived from these centuries. They will have a chance to witness this at Grolier in ways that are unparalleled.
Now, one of the manuscripts, illuminated manuscripts that will be there, will be the Rothschild Mazor. And what's so many unique aspects to this manuscript, but it represents Jews in the midst of the Renaissance of Florence. Can you tell us a little bit about this manuscript, and how did we get it, how did it come to be, and why is it significant the way it came to be? Sure.
Well, a machzor, modern Jews will think of a machzor as a high holiday prayer book. But the way it was used was to describe any kind of liturgical cycle. That's what the word machzor means. And this manuscript is one of the most finely produced such liturgical cycles. Could be used by somebody literally throughout the Jewish year. It's one of the most magnificent ever produced.
Well, we see here, it looks like it's Moses reaching up to receive the Ten Commandments there on the left.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, this is actually a marvelous illustration of the way Jewish life embedded itself in the broad culture and made that culture part of what it meant to be a Jew. So if you look at the image, first of all, the Israelites at the bottom of the Mount Sinai, you can see they're all dressed in Renaissance Italian dress.
That's right. They look like they came right off the street.
Right? So, well, pretty fancy off the street, but off the street, right? Because this was produced, after all, for an affluent Jewish family. In addition, the conventions of it, the decoration throughout the manuscript, really reflect what it meant to produce art or create beautiful books in the Renaissance. There were 4 workshops here, one of which was Christian. So there's cooperation between the communities.
So in some ways, it shows a different aspect of religion in the Renaissance that maybe many people didn't realize was there.
That's right, that's right. You can't write a responsible history about, I would say, life in general, but certainly not Jewish life, without referencing works like this, because they preserve evidence of the way people really lived that you won't find in dry histories.
Well, you'd also, right here in the center, the titling means what?
Moshe Kibel, Moses received the Torah at Sinai. This is these are the first words of a rabbinic tractate called Wisdom of the Fathers, right. Usually in English translation. And it's a collection of wisdom teachings, and the ritual is to learn it, to recite and learn its 6 chapters over the course of 6 sequential Sabbaths during the summer months. So it's an important part of the annual cycle.
Well, now I'd like to look at a Seder Berkat, which is a very interesting window into home life of a Jewish, upper class Jewish family. We have here a woman sitting in a room at night, I assume, doing her devotional. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a beautiful little manuscript. I mean, with the finest calligraphy. The artwork is very, very striking. It's from Vienna in 1724 is when it was produced. And so there's a move toward more recent modernity, actually. At this time, Jews...
Sort of the age of... we go from Renaissance to the age of rationalism.
Exactly. But one of the things that's important about this is it is evidence of the spiritual life of women. All too often, we see histories written about religion that focus on the public performance. And public performance has been dominated by men. There's been some recovery of the woman's experience, but this shows the very intimate, the very personal part of that experience. As she prepares to go to sleep, she recites the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, which is a way of connecting to God before going to sleep.
We also, we see from there, we start to get an understanding of sort of the rivulets of impact through families and civilizations and times. You also are showing a leaf from the Prato Haggadah. The Haggadah is a book of liturgy for Passover, and this particular Haggadah is fairly famous for several different reasons. It dates, we're going back a little bit, back to the 1300. Tell us a little bit about this manuscript and what does it tell us? So
the manuscript is part of the Catalan tradition of manuscripts from, of Haggadot actually, Spain, right, during this period. It's actually very closely related to the famous Sarajevo Haggadah. Some of your listeners may have heard of that. Interestingly, it is an unfinished manuscript, not on the page that we show, but on other pages. We have an incomplete page which shows something of the process of how these illuminated manuscripts were created, the steps by which they were created.
These are very complex process because you're involving a paper or parchment mainly, and tempera, and gold gilt, and ink for the writing. How do you put all of those together and not create a scramble?
Well, they were done very carefully. We can see from, so they would first of all write the text, right? Yeah. Then the artist would sketch or outline what was going to be added in terms of decoration or illustration. And then the parts, whether it was of the words or the illustration, that were going to have gold leaf, because this was going to be illuminated, they would apply gesso, a chalk substance. that would raise the gold and enable the light to reflect off of it in all directions. It also helped preserve the gold. So this is a very, very fine example. The page we have here is an illustration of the first of the 4 sons.
Yeah, the wise son.
Right.
Why was he wise?
Well, we don't know the individual, of course, right? But
I mean, there are all sorts of stories.
Yes, but the artist's interpretation, and that's what we have here, the artist's interpretation is that what makes him wise is that he's got a book on his lap, right? Wise person needs books, and that should not be taken for granted during the manuscript age, because books were relatively rare. They were very expensive, right? So if somebody's got a book, that's meaningful, and his hand is raised in instruction, meaning that he's not only learning but also teaching.
Well, what? By the way, we see the wise son is sitting as a model here. Do we know? Did they work from looking at a person and drawing them, or was it out of their imagination?
I think this was probably imagination. The next page after this is the so-called wicked son.
Yes.
Right, and the wicked son is illustrated as a violent individual, a soldier, right,
really?
with a dagger, with a sword. I mean, really frightening image. And I love to reference that because it tells me that when these Jews thought of what it meant to be wicked, they equated it with violence.
That would be rather startling.
Yeah.
You also got Jews in other parts of the world that, like in Iran, Persia, who interacted in an interesting way with their Muslim neighbors to bring together works that would sort of have a broad appeal. One that you have in the exhibit is Yusuf and Zuleika.
Zuleika, yes.
And this is a mid-19th century leaf. And what's interesting about this is, one, it's about the poem of Joseph and the wife of Potiphar, and as told by a Muslim poet. Can you tell us a little bit about this and how that story changed, and then what does it mean to us today?
Yeah. So this is an important story in the Joseph saga, way back in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible. In that context, the unnamed wife of Potiphar tries to seduce Joseph, and Joseph resists. And
then she accuses him or
and
something.
she accuses him, and he's thrown in jail. That's the Torah story. This story shows up in the Quran, whereas he's running away from her, Potiphar shows up with his fellows, and one of them says, you know what, if the rip is in the front of Joseph's garment, he was trying to take her. If it's in the rear of his garment, it means that she was trying to seduce him. Turns out she was trying to seduce him, so he goes free. Right? That version of the story shows up in rabbinic teaching. And then all of this is adopted into Muslim teaching, but really we're talking about here I'm blocking on the word, the spiritual tradition. How does one unite with God? Right? And so the teaching, which goes back to a Muslim poet and is here repeated in Judeo-Persian for Jews to read.
The poet's name was?
Jami.
Jami. He was a mystic.
He was a mystic, right. Yeah. Thanks. That was the word I was looking for.
Right.
And this mystical tradition suggests that in order to love God properly, you need to love another human being. Right? And the model of Joseph and Zuleika, right, was used for this, and it was accepted and taught in both Muslim settings and in Jewish settings.
Now, just out of curiosity, Jima was the poet?
Jami. Right.
The poet was mystical. Did that mysticism resemble the Kabbalistic mysticism, or is it very different?
It had some overlap for sure, and we do know, it's interesting, that Islamic mysticism was very much admired by certain Jews who aspired to the mystical direction. It's called out, for example, by the son of the famous rationalist Maimonides. His son writes about the Muslim mystical way as being the right path toward uniting with God.
That's interesting. And the Jewish mystica Safed were also, did they interact with Muslim mysticism?
Oh,
also?
sure, absolutely.
So in this manuscript, what we have is it's a Persian poem. This manuscript was done in Persia.
Yes.
And what do we know about the artist as calligrapher of the manuscript? Do we know much about?
Not a lot, no. I mean, what we do know is that the work was produced in Mashhad, which was an eastern sacred city of Persian Iranian Islam. And there was a complicated history in the mid-19th century between Jews and Muslims. But Jews who
it was sort of rough.
It was rough. But Jews had become very much a part of this tradition, and they preserved it in various settings and ways.
And beyond that particular place, we also have, we'll end with talking about the ketubah that comes from Constantinople. This is a marriage contract. And can you tell us a little bit about this marriage contract?
First of all, before I tell you about this, I want to, I mean, we've gone to Persia, we've gone to Istanbul, we've got other works. People will, I hope, take pleasure in the fact that when they come to our exhibition, they will see that half of it relates to Jewish life in European settings, and on the other side, it relates to Jewish life in Muslim settings. This is an often forgotten fact. For many, many centuries, the vast majority of Jews lived in Muslim settings and continued to be a significant presence, and that is shown in these works. What we've got here is a ketubah, as you said, from Istanbul. Ketubot are a tradition that, first of all, the word means writ, literally something that's written. The tradition goes back to antiquity. It emerged from the recognition that women were at a disadvantage in those times and places, in those societies. And the best time to get an agreement that will protect the woman's interests is just before she gets married.
That's the PowerPoint.
That's exactly. And so the ketubah was the rabbinic Jewish version of that ancient tradition. For a long time, these ketubot were live contracts. They could be adapted, they could be changed, the amounts could be changed, and they were written like contracts. But at some point, people said, wait a second, this is an important moment in life, marriage, right? And so they began to be decorated, illuminated. They became beautiful works of art, and that spread into various settings. Here we've got a very fine example of this. And typically, it quotes the verse from Proverbs. This is an important part of the ketubah tradition. One who has found a wife has found good.
Is that good like tov? Like
that's the word tov. You got it.
Very desirable good.
Exactly.
What we have here, they got more and more ornate, more and more illustrated. Did the women have anything to say how they would be drawn up or illustrated? That is, the woman says, I don't want that scribe, I want a different scribe. Did you have that type
It's a good question. I mean, every case is individual. There were different women in different Jewish societies, in light of the larger society, had different power, particularly when they were young, different elements of influence. But we do know, because we've got ketubot that go back to Cairo, for example, in the 12th, 13th century, that if a woman had an interest, such as we've gotten our collection of that comes from Cairo from those years, a woman who said, you know what, I don't want my mother-in-law to live with us.
She put that in?
And that was included. I mean, there are all kinds of different things. Those were polygamous societies, right? I mean, a man could have multiple wives. If a woman wanted to insist, sorry, fella, one wife, she insisted that be put into the ketubah.
Well, do we have ketubahs today? Do we have the same type
Oh,
of
the same kind?
contract?
No. Tubas today have become far more formulaic, although there is a movement today toward greater creativity in tubot, and they're far more diverse than they were, say, 50 years ago.
Now, you're not only a professor and scholar, but a rabbi. You probably pronounced this proverb in some of your ceremonies. Is that right?
I have indeed.
And does that, each time you say it, does it bring a new memory or a new thought, or does it become sort of rote? Because proverbs they're supposed to be everyday, repeatable, but at the same time, they're supposed to sort of create a little delight.
Yeah. You know, I'm a professor, I'm the director of the library at JTS. I don't do this regularly.
Yeah.
I've performed many weddings over the years, but not regularly. So it never gets boring. Right? It never gets rote, even if you've said something similar before, because the moment of the wedding is so filled with hope. The Jewish wedding, and this is reflected in the ketubah as well, is about trying to preserve the beauty and complete happiness of the Garden of Eden. Right? And I always find that inspiring.
You know, the exhibit really makes us always think about what did they think about where Zion is? Is it the future? If it's where we live, is it Israel, or is it, as I'm from Texas originally, is it in Texas? As some Jews in New York used to say, it could be. Well, what in this collection do you see this reflection on Zion and its coming or existence?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, the Haggadah ends with the formula, next year in Jerusalem.
That's right.
But don't misunderstand that phrase. Right? Next year in Jerusalem doesn't mean next year in Jerusalem. What it means is that redemption should come soon. Right? Because traditional Jews through the ages unambiguously imagined that the return to the literal Zion, the land of Zion, would happen by divine intervention in the Messianic future. So there is reference and orientation towards Zion. I mean, that will appear in some of these works. In many, it's not the point. But the other element of it that's worth noting is that often through the ages, when Jews found themselves in comfortable homes, they said, this is our Zion. We have brought Zion here to where we are now living. And even if they don't say so explicitly, many of these works, the beauty of what they represent is a testimony to the fact that Jews, even in our diasporas, have often felt that we are living truly at home.
Now, this is a very large exhibit, and 100 objects, with requiring a great deal of thoughtfulness, intellectual expertise, and of course there's many to choose from. How did you decide to do this exhibit? How did this exhibit come to be? Where did it start? I know that you exhibited the Prado Haggadah at
the cloisters most recently, right?
Right, and even then I thought, oh, there's something bubbling there. Did you know that it might come to be a bigger exhibit?
We didn't. We've had a relationship with the Metropolitan Museum for a long time. I taught a couple of the curators at the Met, and they when I became director of the library, they expressed interest in borrowing our works to fill out some of their exhibitions. But, so how did this come about?
Yeah.
How did we conceive of it? We've got more riches than you can imagine. Part of what informed it was that these are especially beautiful works, many of them, or especially significant works. But how do you organize it? How do you think about this? And there, it related to the fact, when I, over the years, have given tours of small pieces of our collections, I've often said, if you want to see ancient Jewish life or the survivals of ancient Jewish life, or modern, some really astounding phenomena, go to Israel, right? Because that's where you'll find the survival. But during the Middle Ages, into early modernity and beyond, that's not where Jews lived and produced these things. The remains, the evidence of what we cared about and what we produced were in the books that we created. And we have got more of those books than virtually any other collection on earth, and that is what people will have a chance to see.
Well, which one did you say? This is the first one we got to use.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pick the first one? The first manuscript. You say, this is the one I really want to be in there.
You know, we have certain works we love. Each of us who gives these tours, curators, we know the ones we love, and there's a tremendous amount of overlap. Those were the first ones we chose. And then, having arrived at the geographical orientation, we said what will fill it out. And that's what people will see.
What's your favorite piece?
Oh my gosh.
I'm asking you to say, which child will you
Yeah, really. Which is my favorite? Well, coming back to a theme that we mentioned before, there is a prayer book, very modest but very beautiful, and from a wealthy setting, also Renaissance, very beautifully decorated, that was created for a woman, right? A young woman that was a gift upon her wedding, and there is a blessing in which traditional prayer books say, thank God for not making me a woman, and that young woman in Renaissance Italy said, thank God for making me a woman and not a man.
She said that?
She did indeed, and it's right there in the manuscript.
Oh my God.
And so the evidence for what really existed, what people really said, that's what we can find in these works.
Oh my gosh, what a precious find.
Yeah.
Is this a well-known work?
We've spoken about it a lot. It's not, I mean people
when
are surprised by it all the time.
That's exactly what I'm asking. I'm saying, I'm surprised.
And, yes.
And who discovered that surprise? I mean, of course, she did.
Right.
But afterwards, who?
It's been in our collection. We've known about it, and there's a couple of other examples in other collections.
Well, you know, this is one reason to go see this exhibit. There's many surprises. It's like going into the world of Jews around the world, interacting with peoples around the world. And we're really glad that we had Professor Kraemer with us today to spend some time instructing us, correcting our very atrocious Hebrew, and maybe making all of us a little bit wiser. This exhibit starts at September 17th.
September 17th till the end of December.
Where is it at?
At the Grolier Club, Midtown Manhattan.
I'm asking you to do that because I don't pronounce that very well. Okay, thank you very much, Journeyers. I'm Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religious Television. Bye.